Hello there, you awakening wonders, and what a glorious day it is, for surely everything has changed. The two anti-establishment candidates have aligned to form a challenge to the uni-party problem. You might say, what? Donald Trump, he is the epitome of the problem. Or you might say, RFK, that wacko crackpot, and that probably means you've consumed too much legacy media. Or AstroTurf YouTubers who parrot the points of the establishment, telling you gleefully that Kamala Harris's speech means that Middle Eastern problems will be resolved, war will be ended, equality achieved by all. But we know propaganda when we see it, and we were looking at it live during the DNC. Let me know in the chat if you join Neil Oliver and I for our live watch along. But the news cycle moves fast these days, and from the moment that RFK stepped out onto the stage in Arizona, the Democrats had a new problem. You know what our position is here on this show. We believe that the greatest threat to your freedom is the sets of institutions represented broadly by, for example, the Democrat Party or the Labour Party in this country, or Macron or Trudeau in Canada. Globalism, sets of bureaucrats that want to usher us into technological dictatorship. Trump is clearly pretty far from perfect by many of your assessments, although I know there's a lot of MAGA people out there, and I welcome all of you, because now what we are focused on is the creation of an anti-establishment alliance. How can you argue that anything other than a Trump-Kennedy presidency will lead to further dictatorship, further technological feudalism? This is an opportunity for mass disruption. Remember, Kennedy is the man that wrote the book, The Real Anthony Fauci. Do you remember that when it was in the New York Times bestseller list? No, you don't, do you? Because the New York Times wouldn't publish the figures when that was the best-selling book. Why? Because if you read The Real Anthony Fauci, you will see with incredible receipts, with incredible diligence, the participation of Fauci in particular and the sets of agencies that he represents in a variety of catastrophic events, most notably and obviously the COVID pandemic, but furthermore, events that took place in the 80s with regards to HIV and the subsequent AIDS, not pandemic, but crisis, certainly crisis. So this is an important moment politically. You can see how the legacy media are grinding, hustling, working incredibly hard to ensure that your focus remains on the hot button topics where they know they can galvanize their audience, talking about little but pro-life issues or the hair's breadth social and cultural issues that they know that they can galvanize and attract using. But this is an important moment. This is a moment for us to challenge legacy media, institutional power, globalist corruption, which all loosely these days, it seems, corrals and coalesces around politicians that still somehow maintain the hue of leftism. But leftism these days just means state power versus the people, using the idea that they're going to protect us and look after us and provide us with convenient little consumer cultures to protect us from what? To protect us from whom? Let's get into these stories straight away, and let's talk about how important it is that we take the opportunity, or you do, because I'm not an American, you take the opportunity to disrupt the bandwagon of corporate globalist power that had its great jamboree at the DNC, only to wake up to find that the world had already changed with RFK joining Trump. Let's get into it.
He is a great person. I've known him for so long. For the past 16 months, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I love a bit of fanfare and I love a firework, but one of the things you'll be aware of if you've been watching the DNC is the lack of significant address of real policy issues. The inclusion of RFK means three significant things: free speech, What happened to the principles of John Milton, once cherished by the left, that censorship is a problem? You know that the party that wants to censor you are the Democratic Party. You know in our country, the UK, it's the Labour Party that crave censorship, that crave the control of information, because if you can control information, you can control reality. One thing we're all aware of in this campaign is the escalating hysteria means that we have little idea of what the actual policies are. You may have some vague idea that Kamala mentioned price gouging, then stepped away from a bit. You may remember from her speech some bombast about Joe Biden being involved in augmenting peace between the people of Israel and the residents of Gaza, which seems pretty implausible to me. What we have here is an opportunity to focus on some actual policy declarations. 1, free speech. 2, health, in particular the health of children, and 3, an end to the Ukraine-Russia war. These are actual important ideas. Remember, if you're British, Keir Starmer, day 1 of his premiership, straight over to Ukraine to assure Zelensky that funding will continue. Remember, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, hundreds of thousands of Russians have lost their lives. Why? And for what? You are funding this desperate debacle of death and destruction. Why should we continue to? Well, because you've got no choice. If you vote for Rishi Sunak, the war continues. If you vote for Keir Starmer, the war continues. If you vote for Kamala Harris, the war continues. But here, you have an opportunity to end war. So this is, in a sense, an invitation to people that consider themselves liberals, or people that consider themselves members of the left, or people that consider themselves the children of the civil rights era, that consider themselves to be members of some kind of counterculture. Do you believe in free speech? Do you believe in ending war? Do you believe in health and challenging big pharma and big food? Well, finally you have an opportunity to vote for someone. Now, I can see in the comments, what about Israel? What about Palestine? What about? Well, what about the certainty that continuing to vote for the centrist, globalist, bureaucrat, managerial, Huxley-esque, Kafka, occupying bureaucrat bang you up for nothing and condemn you on the basis of mere murmurs has to be confronted at some point. And maybe today is that day. Let's have a look at the impact that RFK's alliance with Trump is already having on the election.
Well, I think there's a tremendous upside. I think it's tangible and substantial. Tony Fabrizio, who's a pollster that I've known and worked with for a long time, is the lead pollster for the internal Trump polls, released a memo today going through the 7 battleground states that a lot of people have focused on, talking about North Carolina and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. And in every single one of those 7 battleground states, all of these RFK voters, RFK Jr. voters, break towards Trump. Some of them, Trump is getting 2/3 of the RFK voters, and he's getting about 4%, 3% in these states. And in a state like Pennsylvania, where it could well come down to, tens of thousands of votes, a half a point or 3/4 of a point, that may well make the difference in who the next president is. A lot of people have said that Pennsylvania is going to be the key for Kamala Harris. Democrats cannot win the presidency without Pennsylvania. That is the conventional wisdom. If RFK Jr. makes the difference in other states and Pennsylvania, it really could spell the difference in this campaign. This should be taken seriously. This is a big day in the campaign. And let me tell you, Kamala Harris did not want this to happen on the first day after her convention. She wanted to come out of there riding high.
They say, of course, that the Democrats can't win the election without winning Pennsylvania. That's an adage as consistent as the left look for traitors and the right look for converts. Whatever the new politics is that's about to emerge, and I will remain skeptical about the ability of state institutions that have strong ties to corporations, particularly global ones, that hasn't made a clear commitment to end the deep state, being able to deliver the kind of change that we want to experience. The fact is now there is an anti-establishment alliance. We will see the media working particularly hard now to continue to simultaneously condemn Trump, using the tropes that you will recognize, areas in which he's perhaps not done himself any favors with some of his clumsy language and indeed some of his policies. I, again, don't really care what your perspective is. I mean, I care about what your perspective is, but I'm not trying to change your perspective. What I'm saying is the inclusion of RFK now means that this is a deliberate and demonstrable anti-establishment alliance, and the establishment will have to work double hard to simultaneously convey Trump as a misogynist and a hateful figure and inept and old now that he's not against Biden. And now they're going to have to focus, I suppose, on Bobby Kennedy being a crackpot and a wacko. Whereas, of course, if he was their man, if he had joined the Democrats, if he had formed an alliance with them, he would be an environmental lawyer. He would be a Kennedy. He would be an advocate for free speech. What this gives us an opportunity to do is for perhaps the first time in this campaign to focus on issues. Do you want Big Pharma to be challenged? Do you want big food to be challenged? Do you want your children and your family to be healthy? I urge you, if you've not read it already, to look at the book, The Real Anthony Fauci, and see why the Democratic Party might hate the person that wrote that book, a person that's willing to go out on a limb and outright condemn the various federal and non-federal agencies that prop up the pharmaceutical industry. The legacy media are already working incredibly hard to condemn and damn Bobby Kennedy. You know how the legacy media works. If the legacy media hates them, they must be doing something right. You know that my own personal journey towards being somewhat more open to the idea of Trump, who I, like everybody else from my kind of background, was willing to condemn when he came down the old golden escalator in 2015, you know that I became more open to the idea that Trump was a wrecking ball to the establishment simply because he was condemned so vociferously, so vehemently, and so consistently. Now, let's have a look at the legacy media repoing themselves to say, well, Trump is bad because he said these things, and Bobby Kennedy is bad because he said these things, and Kamala Harris is good because she doesn't say anything at all, unless it's scripted down to the last syllable. Do you think it's right that a presidential candidate can only appear in the best light with every single word penned and examined before you're allowed to hear it, while free speech is under threat, while your children's health is under threat, while perpetual wars are being offered to you as almost unconscious policies? Let's have a look at the legacy media going to work against Bobby Kennedy.
If you've never heard of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the context of this current political moment and all that is broken and bad about it, first of all, lucky you. Sorry to ruin that. We'll start with a quick word on who he is and, crucially, who he is not. RFK Jr. is, as you likely surmise, the son of Robert F. Kennedy, the highly regarded brother of President John F. Kennedy. RFK Jr. is not a scientist. He is not a doctor, although that has not stopped him from spreading lie after lie after lie on topics of public health and vaccine safety. RFK.
It'll be fantastic to break down what is considered lie after lie after lie. Our locals member will already be watching our interview with Jay Bhattacharya, one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, that came out significantly earlier than you might have heard of some of these ideas in the pandemic period, where he said, we should consider the importance of natural immunity. We should consider the importance of shielding the elderly, perhaps as a priority above generalized lockdowns. We should consider the impact on children might not be significant. We should consider the fact that, generally speaking, it isn't wise to vaccinate during an epidemic. And we should be very clear about whether or not these medications, if indeed that's what they are, have been trialed for anti-transmission efficacy. All of these things were 100% true, and at the time were considered 100% false and lies, and were censored at the time. Of course, we understand that when someone is vilified by the establishment, it's because they challenge establishment interest. Look at how quickly MSNBC, which stands for, as you know, Microsoft NBC, which means that even if it doesn't still have economic and financial ties to Bill Gates, it's very much part of the globalist Bill Gates purview, which of course means that it's connected to the WHO. I don't mean in a literal financial sense, but as a general ideology. We clearly now have an opportunity to challenge this fragile sphere of globalist power that immediately engineers realities that are detrimental to the advance of our cause, whether that means condemning Bobby Kennedy or condemning any other vocal opponent of the establishment. Why? all so that the pharmaceutical interests that they continually frame, showcase, and give platforms to can continue to succeed unabated. That's but one reason that the establishment walks together in lockstep against your free speech and your freedom more generally.
RFK Jr. is, however, an overwhelming source of misinformation and disinformation, a purveyor of vile conspiracy theories and fake science.
I'm going to leave YouTube now. Click the link in the description to join us. We're talking a lot about Bobby Kennedy, but we're also talking about other areas where this issue of global censorship and global control comes to the forefront. I'm talking about the arrest of the Telegram founder and how some tech billionaires are good and some tech billionaires are bad, and some tech billionaires are good for your safety and some tech billionaires are bad for your safety. It's an extraordinary story. You're going to love it. We're talking a lot about Bobby Kennedy. Click the link in the description. Get onto Rumble, where we care about your free speech and we're determined to use ours.